This past May, the Denver Nuggets failed again. They failed to win another NBA title whilst Jokic is on the roster. And every year they fail to do so whilst the best player in the league is on the team is going to be looked at with disappointment. Although the starters battled, the depth was terrible, and partly due to over-reliance on the starters and Jokic became very fatigued and had arguably the worst postseason of his career. The exhausted starting lineup, excluding MPJ, played over 37 minutes a night through the postseason. Jokic and Jamal Murray were both top 5 in minutes per game during the postseason, with Gordon being 22nd and Christian Brown being 15th. Meanwhile, the bench had only 2 regular contributors in Westbrook and Peyton Watson, who certainly weren't great and consistently dependable throughout the postseason. The front office heard the noise all summer. The window may be closing, the tax bill is rising, and that the dreams of winning another title with Jokic may be fading. Instead of just running it back and hoping for the best, the Nuggets front office were proactive and finally had a good offseason. Now, heading into this upcoming season, they have a second unit that can actually not even just survive, but probably actually be good. A closing 5 that can be very good defensively, and a superstar who finally gets to breathe a little bit easier, both figuratively and literally. Let's dive into the moves that defined the Nuggets' great offseason and how they define their top-tier contender status this season. One of the biggest moves of the offseason came via a surprising move that sent MPJ and an unprotected 2032 first-round pick to Brooklyn, with Cam Johnson finally being traded and joining the Nuggets. Most importantly, the Nuggets kept their elite floor spacing and three-point shooting at the small forward spot, with Johnson being nearly just as efficient on nearly identical volume throughout his career to that of MPJ. This doesn't even consider the improved defense Cam Johnson will offer as a good on- and off-ball wing defender, which will increase the Nuggets' switchability and versatility. He also improves their connectivity and ball movement on offense over the notoriously shot-happy MPJ. Similar to Aaron Gordon, he's the perfect high-level starter who will make the winning plays and support Murray and Jokic. The next most important factor was the financial implications. The $21 and $23 million of Cam Johnson over the next 2 seasons is much more affordable than the $38.3 and nearly $41 million MPJ is set to be paid. That cost saving, whilst I'd argue getting the better player in the trade, is an amazing trade for the Nuggets, considering it allows them the financial flexibility to continue to make the great offseason moves we're about to discuss. Now, the main valid concern is the recent injury history of Cam Johnson, which I know feels weird in comparison to MPJ, but recent injury history would indicate it's a very valid point. MPJ has only missed 6 games over the last 2 regular seasons, whilst Cam Johnson hasn't played over 60 games in 3 seasons. The hope is that the availability improves for Johnson in Denver, and he can be a more consistently available piece. The next headline move of the Nuggets offseason ensured they brought back their key bench piece and 6th man during their 2023 championship run. Bruce Brown was the ultimate role player before joining Denver, and he was an ultimate Swiss Army knife on that title run in Denver. He was a very pesky on-ball defender, great cutter and connective piece on offense, and always willing to fight for those loose balls to make the winning plays. Now that he was available on a vet minimum, bringing him back for a season was a no-brainer and a crucial add for the Nuggets, the first of several moves this offseason that bolsters their bench. Now, certainly he's taken a step back since his last tenure in Denver, hence the willingness he had to accept a minimum contract. He's battled with injuries, playing only 41 games last season and 67 the year prior. The three-point shooting, which is his biggest swing skill that can impact how productive he is, has also fallen in efficiency since his time in Denver. The good news is that he's often been asked to do more offensively on some of these worst teams over the last couple of seasons compared to what he's been and will likely continue to be expected to do in Denver, which should see some of his offensive production improve. We also need to see some of the defensive intensity pick back up, as his defense honestly just looked poor at times throughout his times in Indiana, Toronto, and New Orleans. Hopefully, at still in the age of 29, this isn't a regression in defensive productivity, but it's just more of a lack of buy-in from Brown now that he hasn't been in a winning situation. If Brown can buy back in Denver, which I believe he will, the Nuggets have likely acquired a key bench piece who they can depend on as part of their playoff rotation, who has all of the intangibles to make the winning plays. After reacquiring their former sixth man, the Nuggets were able to sign a scoring wing who's been voted top 10 in Sixth Man of the Year voting on 3 different occasions. After a very successful season in Detroit, Tim Hardaway Jr. becomes another dependable bench piece that the Nuggets can rely on heading into a postseason run. Now, Hardaway Jr. is certainly a limited player. He's not a great playmaker or even a very good connective piece, and he's not going to be great defensively. But that's what they're leaving Bruce Brown to do off the bench. With Tim Hardaway Jr., the Nuggets get reliable floor spacing, something they've consistently struggled to have off of the bench and will be a massive help to have success offensively in the postseason. Now notice I said floor spacing, not three-point shooting. Hardaway Jr. can be a very good three-point shooter, but he is an inconsistent microwave scorer. He can get hot from 3, but it is very inconsistent at times. The good part of this is that defenses must respect him due to his lethal stretches from deep, where he can simply take over games and win a game for someone. That's going to give the Nuggets consistently good floor spacing. The negative is when he gets cold, and you do truly need his actual production, not just the floor spacing. You can get left out to dry in the cold sometimes. That's part of the Hardaway Jr. experience, but I do believe it ultimately will be a good addition to the Nuggets bench. If you're relying on him as a starter, it can hurt sometimes, and Detroit fans will tell you about the highs and lows that they had with him last year. Off the bench, it's not as big of a deal. Additionally, Tim Hardaway Jr. does offer some amount of shot creation, which will be valuable to have some amount of shot creation outside of Murray and Jokic. You certainly don't want to rely on it too heavily, but it could be valuable in getting extra rest for the 2 stars without the offense completely dying. The big piece that's been missing of the Nuggets bench, especially when you consider that Jokic is the guy manning the team and manning the 5 spot, is the fact that they have not really had a good backup 5 ever in the Jokic era. From the 2024 draft, the hope was Deron Holmes would be a promising floor spacing backup 5, but that hope crumbled when he suffered a season-ending injury before the season even began. That left Denver with Dario Saric, who played 16 very poor regular season games, Zeke Naji, who has continued to fail any signs of development, and a further aging DeAndre Jordan. Naji and Jordan ended up getting very sparse, unproductive minutes in the postseason, and it was very clear an improvement was absolutely necessary to remove at least some pressure and minutes off of Jokic. Now, that's not a new realization that we've seen in the Nuggets teams for the last few years, but nonetheless, it remained very clear. Now, it took a while to be certain he'd actually show up to Denver this year, as he was rumored to have a contract with Greek Giants Panathinaikos, but a trade for Jonas Valanciunas was ultimately the answer, and the best answer of a backup center the Nuggets have had for Jokic in a long time. Now, as the league continues to evolve, JV continues to look like he was put in the league in the wrong era. He's a great post defender. He's one of the best back-to-basket post scorers in the league, in a league that has very few of those guys anymore, and he's a very great rebounder. But he has a lack of foot speed, and he certainly isn't very good at switching, which certainly helps on the defensive end in the modern NBA. Despite those defensive concerns, JV is still a very solid backup 5, and can especially thrive defensively against more interior-focused or traditional bigs. His post defense is still great, and even against those bigger traditional bigs, he is amongst the best at rebounding. Offensively, he's still a very solid post scorer, and although non-traditional in today's league, just letting him get touches on the post a few times a game is an effective way to get another 8, 10, 12 points a night off the bench. Between his hook shot, his strength on a drop step, his elbow range jumper, and his ability to get second chance opportunities, JV won't just be a solid backup for Jokic, but also another source of offensive production for the bench. His 40 games of playoff production also indicate that in the right role, and ideally off the bench, which he will be in Denver, he can be a very productive piece in the postseason. JV, Tim Hardaway Jr., and Bruce Brown are 3 legitimate contributors who can produce offense for this team off the bench and be valuable, dependable, and reliable playoff contributors. Certainly the offense is always going to be worse with Jokic off the floor, but these great bench options will certainly improve what has been a horrid offense at times in years past when Jokic is off the floor. Another signing that could contribute is Kessler Edwards. Now, Edwards is certainly more of a fringe rotation player who is yet to find a home in the NBA, but he does offer more wing depth and another alternative to Peyton Watson. Edwards is a very high-effort, physical, and versatile wing defender that will continue to bring defensive intensity off of the Nuggets bench. The biggest question, and the limiting factor that's kept him off the floor, is his lack of three-point shooting. Last year, that began to change in Dallas, although on very limited volume. If that efficiency can continue, and ideally on slightly higher volume, then the Nuggets have added another quality two-way wing off their bench. At worst, he's a depth wing defender through the regular season who's only on a minimum contract. All of those additions to the already existing roster puts the Nuggets in a great position. Obviously, the stars in Jamal and Jokic are who they are. Aaron Gordon remains one of the best high-level starters in the league, and Christian Braun surpassed almost all expectations and thrived in the starting lineup last season. Alongside the new bench additions and Cam Johnson, the hope is that internal development continues to enhance the roster. Can Julian Strawther become a more consistent and well-rounded player to let his three-point shooting impact games? Can Jalen Pickett emerge as a solid backup point guard? And can Peyton Watson become a better three-point shooter so he can command more minutes and allow more time for his elite defense to take over games? Those types of improvements are what could further bolster what I already believe to be a top-tier contender in Denver. Now, of course, the West isn't going to be easy to get through, as it basically never is. The defending champs are, of course, the juggernaut everyone will be struggling to handle. The now KD-led Rockets will be no simple out either, although they obviously are going to be hurt by the injury to Fred VanVleet, amongst many other teams that are hopeful to make a run out west. The West is going to be as hard as ever to get out of, but I believe the Nuggets have positioned themselves about as well as they could have to win the West and should be considered top-tier contenders. Of course, OKC are going to be the favorites, and deservedly so, but Denver certainly deserves to be in that top-tier conversation. They have the star power, they have a highly productive starting lineup, and now, finally, they have the depth. Denver are more prepared than ever to make a run at their second NBA title this season, largely thanks to this amazing 2025 offseason.